We're going to be making this Palestine flag keychain today. It is an alpha pattern, and the closest pattern that you can use to follow along is number 56458 on bracelet book, although I am only using 15 background strings instead of 17. So for this, you're going to need some sort of keychain. You can also reuse an old lanyard that you have. You also will need some tape, scissors, as well as, of course, the four colors: black, green, red, and white. And I also like to use crochet thread for the background strings, although you can just use your embroidery floss for your background, but I do like using crochet thread at size 10. I find that it gives me a more even look that I like. And then you're going to need some sort of clear glue that is unwashable to use as well at the very end. So you're going to start off by making some knots across your keychain. We're going to be making some lark head knots on our keychain. So I've taken my crochet thread and I've cut 8 different strips of string that are about 25 centimeters long each. Then I'm folding each one in half. I'm putting it inside the keychain, and then I'm looping the rest of the string through the hole that is peeking out. So this gives us our first lark's head knot. So I'm going to be doing this 8 times so that I can have 16 strings coming out for my keychain. Now we're going to start off knotting our keychain. So I have my 4 colors cut out. I've cut out about 150 centimeters. If you ever do run out midway through the keychain of a certain color, you can always add some more, so that's not a big issue at all. So I'm going to start off with the red. I've taped everything to the front so I have it nice and easy at the ready. And we're going to start off with a backward forward knot on the last string. So I'm taking my leftmost background string, I'm putting my red behind it. See how it's kind of underneath that knot? And I'm going to do a backward knot. Tie it up to the top so that's nice and tight with the head knot. And then I'm going to do a forward knot. And you do want to make sure that you push it all the way to the top so that it's not wonky at the top. And now I'm going to do a forward knot on top of my next string. Now, if my terminology of backward, forward knot, backward knot, all of that confuses you, I do have a short video tutorial kind of explaining what these different knots mean. I do use those names as that's what they're commonly called as we knot. So in my design, I have 15 knots across. So I'm going to be making 15 knots, forward knots with my red string. It's technically 13 knots because the very last knot is going to be a backward knot on that very last string. So I'm just going to continue to knot along. Now, as I mentioned, the keyring has 15 background strings. That's how many I want. However, right now, I have 16 backward strings. So to work with only 15, all I'm going to do is midway through my knots, I'm going to take 2 of my background strings. As you see me right now, I have 2 of them in my hand, and I'm knotting 1 knot on top of both. Now, every time I go across that section, I'm going to be taking the 2 strings together to knot on top of them. Okay, and this is allowing us to be working with only 15 strings instead of the 16. The reason why we do this is because, the reason why we have the 16 strings to begin with is that aesthetically it looks a lot nicer to have all of our background strings tied on as lark's head knots. So if I was to just attach the last string by itself and kind of just knot it to the top, it wouldn't look as nice. So we can use this trick of taking 2 strings and combining them together so that you have an odd number of background strings to deal with that, so that I can still attach all my background strings as lark's head knots and then knot and combine 2 of them together. Now I'm reaching the end of my first row, and as I go to the last string, I'm going to do a forward knot and then a backward knot. So I'm doing a forward-backward knot on this last one. And this allows the edges to have a straight look so that they don't look curvy on the sides. So you'll see that my string is now kind of coming out from the inside part. So I'm just taking it and pushing it to the back so that's not in the way. Now we're going to start a new color at this point. We're going to introduce the black in our keychain. So that's why I had to push the red to the back, because I don't want it to be in the way as I work with the black. Now I'm starting off with the black from the right side, so I just changed my black location to the right. And we're going to start off with a forward-backward knot on that last string. So again, I'm going to put my black underneath my first background string, and then I'm going to do a forward-backward between the black and the background string. And again, you want to try and make sure you push that knot all the way to the top so that you don't have any gaps in your keychain. Now we are going to have to switch back colors right away to red. So I'm going to be doing a color change right now. So after my black knot, I'm going to take my black string, kind of put it out of the way up. And I'm going to bring my red string back, make it peak right from where my black string is kind of coming up. I'm going to take my red string, put it there, and then I'm going to do a backward knot. But I'm only going to do the first half of that backward knot. So I'm going to do my first half, and then once my first half is complete, I'm going to weave my black through my red so that you don't see any gaps in your keychain. So I'm taking that black string and I'm just putting it across that red knot that I just made. And now I'm going to complete my second half of the background knot. So it's going to kind of hide the black string and allow us to not have any gaps or any disconnections in our keychain. Once you have that nice and tight, you want to take the color that you just switched out of. So for me, it's black. I'm taking that and I'm putting it underneath the rest of my background strings. Now, of course, we're going to have to switch back to the black after we finish this row when we come back. So you are going to be having to do multiple color switches in this keychain. So I'm putting it out of the way, and now I'm going to do reds, but I'm not going to do the very last background string because we have to switch to the other color at the end. So that's going to be a total of 13 red knots, and they are all backward knots. You can see me kind of pushing the knots upwards after every few knots, and that just allows me to keep my row straight and in line, so that I don't have an uneven keychain at the end. And now I am also getting to that part of my keychain where I use 2 strings. So I'm again remembering to grab both 2 of them together and doing a backward knot on top of both of them. So just consider those 2 strings like 1 string. It's as if they're just 1. And you're always going to take them both at the same time and knot across both of them. Now we're getting to the color switch portion. So it's very similar to how we did our color switch to begin with. I'm going to take my red and kind of put it to the back. I can't really do the weaving in portion of the color switch at the very end of the bracelet, like with the last background string on the edge. It just doesn't work. So what you do in that case is just take the string that you were using and put it to the back. And now I'm taking my green string, putting it underneath that background string, and I'm going to be doing a backward knot and then a forward knot. So it's a backward forward knot all together. And that allows me to incorporate the green. And this also finishes my second row of the keychain. Now just after I finish this row, I'm going to have to right away start the third row. And the third row again starts with a green. So I just push my green streak to the back a little bit just to kind of align the knot. You can see me kind of trying to push it to the top to make sure it's aligned, and also to make sure that it's tight so it doesn't look out of place as I add it to the keychain. Now I'm gonna start my third row. So I'm doing a backward forward knot for this first knot. Now I'm gonna make one more knot with the green, and it's just going to be a forward knot, and then I'll be switching my colors back to red. Now you will notice the pattern that we kind of have to do with this keychain. So every row we increase the colors on the edges, so the black and the green, and I'm going to keep increasing them until I reach 5 knots of that color. And then after I reach the 5 knots, that's when I'm going to start incorporating then the white that's in the center. So this is the second row, adding in the edge colors. So now I'm at 2 knots on the sides. I'll be now switching to red. So again, I'm taking that red, I'm making it peek out where that green is coming, so right after those 2 knots, and I'm gonna tie my first part of my forward knot, then I'm gonna take the green down, put it across that knot that I just made, and then do the second half of that forward knot on top of the green. And then at this point I can take that green string and push it to the back. So I'm just going to take it and tuck it underneath all the other background strings. And now I'll continue with my forward knots with my red. So there has to be a total of 11 knots of red. So I just did one, so I just need to do 10 more before I switch back to black. Now I'm doing the color switch back to black. So again, I'm going to take my red, I'm going to put it up out of the way, and then I'll take my black string that is hanging out at the back and put it right where I want my next knot to be. So right under where that red is going up. And then I'm going to do my first half of my forward knot with the black. Then I'm going to bring down the red, put it across that knot that I just made, and do the second half of the forward knot. Now I am going to pull a little bit on that red because I noticed that there's a bit of a gap. There was some of that string kind of coming out. So you can just tug on it a little bit so that it goes away. And then again, I'm going to take that red, put it to the back, hide it, so that it's not in the way and it's not peeking out, and then complete with my color. So I just need to do a forward backward with my last knot. Now I'm starting a new row, and the new row starts off with black again. But before I start, of course, I am adjusting any knots, making sure everything stays in a straight line. And now I'm starting my fourth row. So we're doing a forward backward knot, and then we'll do 2 backward knots with the black before we do our color switch with red. And now it's time to switch colors. And for this row we need 9 knots of red. So again, I'm taking in my red, putting it where my black is coming out. I'm gonna do my first half of the knot, which is the first half of a backwards knot. And I'm going to take the black and put that on top of my knot that I just made. Then I'm going to complete my knot with the second half. And of course, take that black string and put it underneath the rest of the background strings. And now I'll just continue with my red knots all the way across until I reach the third last background string, where I'll have to do the color switch. Now we're going to be starting our greens again. So same idea, we're going to take our red, put it to the top, bring in our green right where we want to do our first backwards knot. Do half of the backwards knot, bring back the red, put it across that knot that we just made, and then complete our backwards knot. After this, we're going to do one more backwards knot, and then the last string is going to be a backward forward knot. Now we'll be starting our fifth row. On the fifth row, we're going to start it off with 4 green knots. And this is, again, I'm going to start off with another backward forward knot. And then I'll do 3 forward knots with the green. Now we're going to be switching back to our red, and with our red we're going to be making 7 knots. And again, I've put my green to the top. I'm bringing in my red where I'm going to do my next knot, and I'm doing the first half of my forward knot, bringing back my green, and doing the second half on top. Now I'll take the green, put it to the back, move my green string behind the rest of the background strings, and just continue with the forward knots with the red. So I have 6 more to go. It's time to do the color switch back to black. Again, taking the red, putting it out of the way to the top, bringing the black in where I want to do the knot, doing half of the forward knot, bringing back the red down, and then doing the second half of the forward knot. And then again, I'll take my red and put it behind my background strings before I continue doing the rest of my black knots. So for my black knots, I'm going to do 2 more forward knots, and the last one's going to be a forward backward knot. Now I'm going to be starting off my 6th row with 5 blacks, 5 reds, and then 5 greens. But before I started knotting, you can see me here just making sure that the spacing between all the knots is even, making sure that it's all straight, and evening out any of my lark head knots at the top. So we're going to start off with a forward backward knot between the black and the first background string, and then we're gonna do 4 backward knots. Now this row is supposed to be containing 5 blacks, 5 reds, and 5 greens. But as I'm doing the voiceover, I realized that I jumped right into the row with white. So this would technically be the next row after it. So I'm making a color switch to white over here, incorporating it, doing the same kind of thing that we did with previous color switches, but now I'm just taking the white that I had on the side, and then I am switching the black into it, and then I am switching back to the red right away. So there's just one knot of white, and then I'm going back to the red and doing another color switch. Okay, so with my white still up, I tie the red on the next string, then I put the white over top of it and tie the red knot. And then I do 3 reds on this one. So as I was saying, this was supposed to be the last row without white, but I kind of skipped that. So when you guys do it, you can definitely incorporate the 5 black, 5 red, 5 green row. I just made a little mistake, but as you can see, it's not really a noticeable mistake in the finished product. I only noticed it now as I'm doing the voiceover. So it's okay if you accidentally miss a knot in a row or something like that. I find the most important thing is that you are making sure you're symmetrical on both sides, so that doesn't look uneven. So again, I did a color switch with the white. I'm doing just one white knot, and then I have to switch back to green right away. So I'm doing my first backward knots with the green, putting the white on top of it, and then doing the second backward knot before I continue with my green all the way to the end, doing 5 knots with the green in total, and then of course ending in a backward forward knot. This row will now contain 5 greens, 2 whites, 1 red, and then another 2 whites and 5 blacks. So I've done a backward forward knot on the first background string, and I'm doing 4 forward knots in the next strings. Now I'm doing the color switch with the white. So I'm bringing in the white, doing the first half of the forward knot, putting the green over top of it, and then doing the second half of the forward knot. Now I'm gonna put the green behind the background strings and do 1 more knot of white. So here's another forward knot with white. And now I'm gonna do the color switch with red, and this is the last red knot of our flag. After this, you don't need to do any more red knots in this pattern. So I'm just gonna be switching with the red, doing the first half of the forward knot, then putting the white on top of the red, and doing the second half. Now, when you just do 1 knot of a color, I don't need to take that white string and put it behind my background strings because I'm gonna switch back to it right away. So what I'm doing instead is I'm putting my red to the top, bringing my white down, because I have to do another color switch with the white, right? So, and at this point I'm just doing a color switch. So I'm doing a half forward knot, bringing the red down on top of it, and then doing the second half of the forward knot. I think this part right here where you have to do color switches between every one knot is probably the trickiest part of this alpha. And in alphas in general, doing frequent color changes. And now at this point, now that I've tied my white again, I'm gonna push my red string to the back, and I'm actually completely done with it right now for this alpha, so I don't have to worry about that red string anymore. And now I'm gonna do one more knot of white, forward knot, and now I'll switch to black to do 5 knots with the black. Now with color switches, that's where you could get the most unevenness in your alpha, and that's why I'm taking my time to really straighten it out over here before I move on to the next color. So I'm doing the first half of my forward knot with black. Then I'm putting the white string over top of that knot and tying my second half of the forward knot on top of the white string. Now I'm going to move that white string to the back. And then I'll do 3 more forward knots with the black. And then the last knot is going to be a forward backward knot. Now for the rest of the keychain, it's going to be a repetition of the same row colors. So 5 black, 5 white, 5 green, and then going back it's going to be 5 green, 5 white, 5 black. So you're going to start off with a forward backward knot, and then 4 backwards knots with the black string. And then you're gonna color switch to white and do 5 backwards knots with the white. And now you're gonna do your last 5 knots with the green, so we're doing a color switch. And then we're gonna do 4 backwards knots with the green, and then the last knot, the 5th one, is gonna be a backward forward knot.
Time's limited, so you must listen carefully. We're all locked in now. You're safer here than any place else. Now just lock yourself in and keep quiet. We can create a perfect world in our heads.
Now going back in the other direction, we're gonna start off with our 5 greens. So we'll do a backward forward knot with our green and our first background string. And then we'll do 4 forward knots between the green and the rest of the background strings.
Time's limited, so you must listen carefully. We're all locked in now. You're safer here than any place else. Now just lock yourself in and keep quiet. We can create a perfect world in our heads.
Now we're gonna do 5 forward knots with white. So we're gonna do a color switch first, doing half of the forward knot on our background string before incorporating the green into that knot by putting it on top of it, then tying the second half of the knot. And then of course we're gonna take our green, move it to the back, and do the rest of our forward knots, 4 forward knots. And now we'll do our last black strings or black knots. Again, we're going to do half a forward knot with the black and the background string. And then we'll do our color switch by putting the white string on top of that first half of the knot before completing the second half. After this, we're going to do 3 more forward knots, followed by a forward backward knot on our last string. Now you're going to continue doing this these two rows. You're going to be repeating the same thing over and over and over for however long you want your flag to be. I tend to do 15 rows. I find that gives it a nice length. But of course, it's up to you how many rows you would like to incorporate in your flag. Now we call this kind of pattern where you're tying 1 knot at a time in like this almost like pixel art formation, because you're doing each knot is kind of like a pixel. We call this an alpha bracelet. For some people, tying alpha patterns and bracelets is a little more easier than doing the normal patterns, as my previous Palestine bracelets were. And for some people, they find this a little more difficult. I think for beginners that just want to take it one knot at a time, it can be a little bit less confusing to do an alpha pattern. However, the color switches do tend to be a little bit difficult. Now I'm doing my last row over here, and I almost ran out of strings at the end. And of course, if you do run out of string, you can always just take another strand of the color that you need, tape it to the back, and then when you do a color switch, you just incorporate that strand instead. And you can very easily add in another piece of string if you are short on any string. Now after you finish your desired length and you do your last knot in your row, you're just going to take it and clean up the back. So I'm just cutting all the extra strands that are peeking out. And at this point, I'm going to be gluing the ends of my strings. So I want to make sure that I glue the very end, so the very last knot. You want to make sure you glue there. And of course, your very first knot as well. Those tend to be the places where it could be the loosest. But all of these little knots are knots, right? So they're very difficult to come undone. So you don't need to put too much glue, especially near the center where we cut off all the strings in the middle. These tend to be quite sturdy, so you don't even need to glue them, but I do just for peace of mind. And then you're just going to cut the ends, and there you have it.